Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to be with you for the seventh day of this 10-day resilience challenge. And today we're going to talk about the sixth pillar, which is emotional balance and mastery, something that a lot of people struggle with. And part of the reason is that we get these messages as children. You shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't express your anger. You shouldn't cry. Girls, boys get different messages, but there are many ways that we learn to suppress our feelings. If we're angry with a mother or a father, that's dangerous. Our livelihood, our survival depends on our primary caregivers. So that dependence really gets in the way of us feeling we can express feelings such as anger for fear of upsetting the parent, maybe having them reject us. And so these feelings we learn to find different ways of suppressing. This is part of our defense mechanisms, but it doesn't serve us not to deal with our feelings. Feelings that are triggered, emotions that are triggered by experiences in our lives, they create movement and energy in our body. And if we don't release them, we then have to hold them in. And so we're creating energy, holding it in, and that gets in the way of our optimal functioning. Furthermore, think of it in your own lives. Think about, people that you may be upset with. When you are with them, and you don't feel you can express those upsets, think about it. Think about how that kind of gets in the way of the relationship. I know when I was growing up, one of the things I realized was when I was upset with my mother and she would go to hug me, I would have a tensing reaction to that because I was carrying that resentment and it didn't feel good to have her hug me. So translate that into other relationships and other situations where when we're carrying feelings, it interferes with the optimal connection with other people. It also builds up tension in our bodies. And so it's so important when you're carrying emotions that you, number one, notice that you are, and then number two, find a way to express it, to get it out. And that's another way that we have difficulty because a lot of times we feel I can't express my feelings to this person. They're going to get upset with me. They'll be angry with me. They may reject me. And so then we feel stuck. Or we're holding feelings, carrying feelings for somebody that's no longer in our lives. They still need to find a way to resolve feelings that you're carrying inside of yourself. One way of noticing that this is something going on with you is when you have a big reaction to something in life that is not that important. Why am I having this big reaction? Usually it's because the current situation is tapping into a pool of feelings that have not been addressed or resolved. And so you have this big reaction because some of those feelings get released. When we carry feelings, sometimes we actually unconsciously create conflict almost as an excuse to blow up, to express a feeling. When we have holding on these feelings, as I'm saying, we have what I refer to as emotional reactivity. We get our feelings triggered. When that happens, we're also not able to think at our best. When we're reacting from an emotional place, we don't think at our best. We refer to that as emotional thinking. Emotional thinking then gets pulled in incorrect directions based on a bias caused by our holding in of feelings. When we make decisions, when we're trying to think clearly. Thinking clearly means we're not being contaminated by our thinking is not being contaminated by our emotions. So today, as we focus in on emotional balance and mastery, it's up to you to kind of go through the day to day, noticing your emotions, noticing if you're carrying unfinished emotional business toward the people in your life. Today is a day and an opportunity to evaluate your emotional balance and mastery. Now, we could do it as we move through the day, noticing what's going on in our relationship with people in our lives, or we could do it in fantasy. We can imagine that person sitting next to us. In fact, take a moment right now and think of somebody who maybe you have some unfinished business with. Imagine them sitting right next to you. And just take a moment to imagine it's really happening, that they're really sitting there next to you, and see if you can feel something taking place in your body. Take a moment to do that right now. If we're carrying unfinished business toward that person, we might start to feel the agitation. We might notice, oh yeah, I am angry. We may feel tensing in our bodies. We may feel some other level of upset. Okay. So what we're doing now is we are simply noticing, recognizing, becoming more aware. When we push feelings down, we're not able to be selective. We're not able to just push down the feelings we don't want, we don't like. We literally have to hold our bodies to hold those feelings in. When we do that, we interfere with the flow of energy in our bodies, and it interferes with our experience of joy and happiness. In fact, to some degree, the pushing down of feelings, depressing of feelings, is a main source of depression. I've worked with many people in my career where their depression was directly a function of their pushing their feelings down. And when I would speak to them, they would acknowledge, yeah, I have a hard time connecting with my feelings. So sometimes we push them down so much, we're trying to push them away so much that it becomes more and more difficult to recognize and identify them. So have patience with yourself. If you are feeling a little bit depressed, that may be the source of the depression. On the other hand, with anxiety, think about this. If I'm trying not to notice my feelings because they're uncomfortable to me, for whatever reason, something in my day, in my life, might touch into those feelings and they may start to bubble to the surface. If that becomes uncomfortable, and that becomes anxiety, a source of anxiety. And the anxiety can be unconsciously fearing that those feelings are going to erupt, that I won't have control of my feelings, and they will start to leave me feeling out of control. That's a source of anxiety. So again, I'm identifying all the reasons why it's so important to be in balance with your feelings, which begins with noticing, recognizing what they're about, and then taking some steps to work through them. One way of working through them is to recognize that what needs to be finished is not the relationship issue, it's what you're carrying. So we may get stuck. I can't express this feeling because that person, it's not going to make any difference to that person. I'm not going to get my needs met. Again, the goal of getting into a place of balance with your feelings is simply recognizing you have this feeling, finding some way of expressing it, knowing what it's about, and then releasing it. Whether the other person may or may never change their thinking, their behavior. We don't have control over that person, but we do have control how we handle our feelings. So we're separating out the problem, what you are or not getting from the other person, with how you're reacting to it and what you're carrying. That's what you have control over. That's what you can work through and release, whether the problem gets shifted or not. So thank you for joining me for the 7th day of the challenge and the 6th pillar. Pay attention today to your emotional balance and the unfinished emotional business that you carry. That's a signal to you of the things that you need to follow through with in your day and in your life. And want to remind you that my book, The 9 Pillars of Resilience, goes through each of the 9 pillars and gives you step-by-step approaches that can be easily taken that put you on the path toward greater resilience. My website, drstephensideroff.com, any of my social media will give you the links to purchase the book. Until tomorrow, greater resilience to all of you.